The old-fashioned might just be the ultimate minimalist cocktail that stood the test of time for centuries. Spirit, sugar, bitters, garnish, ice, that's all you need to make an old-fashioned. But I do like to add one more ingredient in there, which I think takes it even further and really elevates the drink to the next level. So, without further ado, let's make the old-fashioned. So when it comes to making an old-fashioned, there's actually a few decisions we need to make when it comes to each ingredient in the drink. And I'll talk you through each of these as we go through making it. So the old-fashioned is pretty much always and should always be a stirred drink. So you want to add this into a chilled mixing glass. And I like to start with 60 mils of our base spirit. A lot of recipes will call for bourbon, which I'm going with here, because that nice high corn content gives it a really complementary flavour, which works with the other ingredients. Kind of toffee-like, butterscotch, naturally sweet without being overly sweet, and a really nice depth of flavour, which you get from the bourbon. But if you prefer a little bit more spice in your old-fashioned, you could go for a rye whiskey. There's a world of flavour in Scotch whiskey and all the global whiskies from all over the world. Taiwanese whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Irish whiskey, Scotch whiskey. These all bring completely different characteristics. And even within those places, you get massive variety between the whiskies you find. So for example, an Islay whiskey could potentially be kind of peaty, almost saline in its kind of flavour profile, whereas a Speyside might be a little bit rounder and sweeter. But then you still get variation within those tiny areas. So whiskey's a world of flavour and you can make a decision. And this doesn't even have to be a whiskey-based drink necessarily, although traditionally it would be. But you can get really delicious results using rum. Even mezcal works really nicely. Tequila, if you use agave as your sweetener. There's a world of flavour to explore in an old-fashioned, and this is the perfect way to do it because it really celebrates the core spirit at the heart of the drink. So now we've covered our base spirit, we need to start thinking about our sweetener. So I actually covered a full episode all about different sweeteners and the options you have earlier in the course, which I'll put up here, which you can watch. But there are a few different ways of doing this. So some people like to put a sugar cube in here, muddle it with the bitters to dissolve it into the bitters, but I find this quite inconsistent, difficult to measure and quantify. Whereas if we use a sugar syrup, A, it's easier to control how much we add, but also B, it actually speeds up the process, removes a few steps, and I think gives better results. I don't really like to have crunchy sugar in my old-fashioned, although I do understand some people like this. So I'm gonna go with a 2-to-1 sugar syrup. This is from Monin, which is their cane sugar syrup. And you can use different types of sugar in your sugar syrup, but I think in this recipe, keep it really clean, really simple, and let the whiskey really kind of be highlighted. So white sugar here, but a brown sugar would work equally nicely. I like to add 5 mils per old-fashioned, but if you prefer it a little bit sweeter, I'd say go up to 10 mils, but I probably wouldn't go beyond this. I think it's gonna get too sweet. We don't want this to be an overly sweet drink, but equally, we don't want it to be an overly boozy drink or an over bitter drink. So this is all about balance, which is kind of hard to achieve, but if you follow this template, I think you'll get a really good starting point. We also have a decision to make when it comes to bitters, and I like to keep things kind of classic here. So I like to go 3 dashes of aromatic bitters, which bring a little bit of spice, those kind of warming, clovey, cinnamony flavors, but you can go with any bitters you choose. Some people like to add a chocolate bitters, orange bitters works really nicely, but I think keeping things classic here actually works really well. And then at the start of the video, I actually mentioned my other favorite ingredient to add to an old-fashioned, which if you've seen my other videos, you might recognize, and that's gonna be this, which is saline solution. And this is made with 1 part salt to 5 parts water, and don't be afraid of this. This can really bring those big flavors together. It won't make the drink taste like salt, but if we think of a chef, they're always gonna season their food. And I think just a small amount of salt in an old-fashioned, once again, brings those flavors together. So you can go really light on this, 0.5 grams is plenty, but I think this does make a really nice difference and really elevate the old-fashioned even further, in my opinion, and my taste preferences. The final variable to think about is gonna be your ice and your dilution. So you wanna stir this drink down with plenty of ice, and contrary to what you might think, adding more ice will actually give you more control over the dilution and slow down the dilution process. And you wanna stir this down for around about 30 to 45 seconds, depending on how fresh your ice is. If it's fresh out the freezer, stir for a little longer, whereas if it's started to melt, go for a little bit shorter of a stir. As I said earlier in the course in my episode about ice and dilution, you can actually measure how much water is added to your cocktail, which is a really easy thing to do. This is a really good way to kind of fine-tune your favorite recipe when it comes to an old-fashioned. We're just gonna strain this over ice or even clear ice if you have it, which is what I'm doing here. And this is just a fantastic looking, fantastic tasting drink, which celebrates whiskey, but isn't overpowered by it. And then finally, you wanna make a decision on your garnish. So I like to go with the zest of orange because it brings a really nice kind of pithy citrus character to the drink. But if you prefer not to have this, you can omit it. You could also add a cherry, which is a really nice kind of sweetener. But because we have spirit, sweetness, bitterness, and a little bit of salt in here, I think the missing piece here is acidity. So just expressing your orange peel over the drink and around the rim of the glass is going to be the perfect way to finish it off. So we'll just tidy this up into a really nice kind of ribbon for our garnish. Now we've expressed the oils out of it. And then this just can live inside our beautiful, rich, complex, whiskey forward and balanced old fashioned. So enjoy that one, everybody, and cheers.